Joined by the fantastic Mr. Sam Kaye today then, who is Europe's only disabled Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitor and coach as well. So thanks so much for joining us, Sam. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome,
Thanks
buddy.
for having me on.
How did it all get started for you then? So, yeah, were you always quite competitive as like a kid? And
yeah, ridiculously so. So I used to swim back in the day. So from the age of 7 onwards, I did regional, national swimming competitions, all the way up until I was 18, 19. Then I got a shoulder injury, which stopped that. And it was then that I managed to sort of stumble upon jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, fantastic, cool. And we'll get straight to it then. Why do you think you're Europe's only BJJ black belt and competitor? Why do you think there aren't many more?
Honestly, it's still a pretty young sport.
True.
As things go. Black belts in this country, I mean, there's plenty of them now, but it's still a pretty young sport. So there's a lot of sort of more disabled people looking to join and start now, but not, the exposure that it's had is minimal in those circles. There's still a lot of people that instantly look at anything combat sport related and go, oh, well, I can't do that. So the fact that the exposure is not there is one thing. If it was in the Olympics or the Paralympics, as it would be different, because then there's funding pushing towards it. And again, when you're a disabled athlete, if you pick up one sport and you tend to do quite well, chances are you've got a bit of a natural affinity for competition as it is. I know swimmers that stopped swimming because of shoulder injuries, chest injuries, whatever it was, and went straight into cycling. And just because of their, genetically they were quite gifted, so they went into cycling and did well in that. Whereas there isn't really a crossover into jiu-jitsu. You've got to find your way into it yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that the Paralympics should involve something like BJJ? Do you think that would be good for the sport, or do you think it would be negative for the sport, or kind of in a grey area of it is what it is?
Yeah, for me, I look at judo in the sense of all the rule changes that have happened in judo since the 70s.
Yeah,
often come about after an Olympic Games. And I've been told by other people in the judo world, it's basically when the Japanese get beaten by a certain technique regularly, they go, oh yeah, you're not allowed that anymore, and they change it out.
Okay, interesting. So a little bit of politics there.
Again, I can't tell you whether or not it's the truth, but that's essentially come from, I won't name him, but it's a coach who is heavily involved in the GB judo squad.
All right, so a pretty reliable source then.
Again, I think it's, as a person himself, he's a bit Marmite. I like him. I get on with him. It's fine. So I think it's, whenever rule changes are brought in, it changes the sport massively. A judoka nowadays is very, very different to a judoka from the sort of 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Yeah.
Especially in the groundwork. In the groundwork aspect of it, there's not many judo clubs now that have fantastic groundwork, and it's not down to anything else other than the rule changes making it more restrictive.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's less of a reason to focus on the groundwork.
And do you think that would happen with BJJ then? So more and more rules would be introduced, and it would maybe be diluted, perhaps?
Essentially, yeah. I know there's sort of federations or associations attempting to create a unified rule set and progress it down the sort of Olympic route, passing it to the IOC. Whether it'll happen or not, who am I to say?
It's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it? Because in one way it's good because it gets that exposure out to the world, and it becomes, and obviously you'll get a high level of athlete coming up through the ranks, because as you said, the funding is going to be there. But then
That's exactly
also
it.
it's like, are you losing some of the martial aspect of it when you make it a sport? If you look at things like sport taekwondo now, arguably it's lost kind of the martial practicality of it, and it's just kind
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
around flicking kicks at each other occasionally until you kind of score a point.
Well, that's exactly what it does. Is as soon as you bring rule sets into things that changes the aspect of what you're trying to do, it does dilute what you're doing as a martial art, in my opinion. So, changing jiu-jitsu and taking out certain throws and, jumping guard, not being able to slam someone, I think is ridiculous. I think if somebody jumps guard, they deserve dropping on the head. Like, I had one of my instructors has a fairly funny story. He was training with Babalu Sobral in Brazil way back, and he kept his guard closed, and Babalu stood up and walked him over to the window of a third-story unit and sort of held him towards the window and said, "This is why you don't keep your guard closed, because you'll just die."
Going dangle out.
Yeah, he just threatened to dangle him out the window. And to his credit, since then, I don't think he doesn't condone keeping your guard shut as somebody stands up.
That would make you change your perspective, to be fair.
It would.
Yeah.
But I think, the IBJJF have banned slams, and to be fair, most rule sets ban slamming. However, if you brought it in and allowed them to slam, people wouldn't do it. Nobody's going to keep the guard shut when they stood up.
Yeah.
When their opponent stood up, should I say, if they were allowed to be slammed on the head.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if it takes away from the applicable nature as a self-defense aspect, or just in general as a fight style.
Yeah, for sure.
The
Definitely.
more rules you bring in, it becomes difficult.
Do you think rules are needed though in competition? So, or do you think you should go back to or do you think there should be a regression maybe back to like the Vale Tudo days where it's like bare knuckle, do what you want, crack on, like challenge match?
Yeah, I mean, if we look towards MMA, I distinctly think you should be allowed to headbutt.
Yeah.
Because I would.
Well, if it's there and it's presented.
Yeah, exactly. I think you should be allowed to headbutt in MMA. 12 to 6 elbows, I don't understand that rule at all. And to be fair, a lot of the not kicking the grounded opponent in the head, or whatever the rule is. I'm a bit out of touch with MMA. I've not followed it as closely recently.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously during lockdown and stuff, I've been watching like UFC's back to back, like from one on the UFC Fight Pass, and seeing number one where it was pretty much no rules and there was groin strikes and headbutts and everything.
Yeah.
And then as it gets bigger, and as people want to like take it, or as the UFC went to travel around more and take it to different cities and things like that, there was more political backlash. And I think it was like John McCain who said it was like human cockfighting and things like that. So at that point, more rules got introduced, and then I think it was like 12 or 13. There was no headbutting allowed at that point, and gloves had to be worn, things like that. And then now you see kind of MMA as a different. It's a different beast than it was in the early 90s. It's a sport itself now.
Yeah, I mean, it develops as time goes on, and everybody adapts to the rules. And I can see why they've been put in place. It creates it a sport. It allows it to be, I can't even think of the word, but it becomes an entity of its own.
Yeah.
There isn't the political backlash, but from my point of view, I'm probably a little bit old school. I think, all right, it's human cockfighting, but those people are choosing to step into the ring and fight each other. Yeah. They're adults. They're allowed to make a decision. Do you want a fighting competition or do you want a point scoring competition?
Yeah, definitely.
But it's the rules and the way that they've been developed that have progressed the sport and created these what we're classing as very well-rounded MMA students instead of single art forms stepping in against each other. Yeah. So it's for the past, to be fair, it's a little bit of why my interest in it's dwindled. That and having kids stops you sleeping. So staying up till 5 a.m. to watch a UFC just doesn't happen.
It's a no-go.
Oh, hell no. But yeah, it's created a very fair fight to some extent. So it's now a case where the most well-rounded athletes, as a rule of thumb, or the athletes that are able to push their own will onto their opponent, are the ones that are winning, as opposed to it being a style for style matchup like it used to be.
Yeah. Which you prefer?
Style for style, absolutely.
Yeah.
Much more interesting. But
Yeah, definitely.
I genuinely believe in the next sort of 5 years, again, it's going to progress again. Everyone's becoming so well-rounded that eventually it will get to the point where these style matchups come back into play, and the people that specialize. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's starting a little bit now. You get your likes of what's his name that's just fought at weekend.
Pass, I'm out of it as well, to be fair.
Is it Adesanya?
Maybe.
Kickboxer.
Yeah, okay.
So, you've got he's had a massive media push. So there's the reason why he's been pushed as much as he has. But he is very much come from a single style background. Gilbert Burns as well, very, very jiu-jitsu based.
Yeah.
He's making his way up through the ranks, as is Charles Oliveira.
Yeah.
So I think it's already happening where the specialists in their own art are coming back to take over this sport again.
Do you think the BJJ will dominate again then, as it did in the early days with like Hoist? So you just smash it.
That's very easy for me to say. I'm very biased in the fact that
definitely.
Yes, I absolutely do. My little brother's looking at going into MMA eventually, and the biggest sort of I did a little bit back in the day, and the biggest mistakes I made was thinking, oh, I'll have a go at striking with this guy. Watched too many Jackie Chan movies and tried to fly and knee somebody and then got knocked out. Mental. Shouldn't have done it, but
learned a lesson though.
I had to. Oh, bloody rocks had fallen on my face, I tell you.
So was the self-defense aspect of BJJ always something that you were interested in, or was it more of the competing sport side when you first started?
The sport side. So when I used to swim, I was on the British swimming team, and you used to have to sign a contract saying basically you wouldn't do any sport that would risk injury.
Right.
However, from the age of about 11, I was a massive sort of early UFC fan all the way through to, not all the way through, but I watched the UFC a lot. I watched WEC back in the day.
Yeah.
So I always followed it from afar thinking, oh, that'd be great. I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
Didn't really have any interest in the striking. It was the groundwork that I used to do. And me and my old man used to roll around at floor in the living room. Didn't have a clue what to do. Basically, he'd pin me down and just elbow me in the ear. Great. Absolutely great. But you'd never get away with it nowadays. You'd end up on some form of register for child abuse.
You have to sign something. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's what we did. And, I loved it. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And it just happened to be that at the time he had a soft play centre for children. And in stumbles some bloke with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu t-shirt on who just moved up to the area.
Right.
And the soft play centre was matted.
Yeah.
And we, at the time, we had to travel an hour down the road to go to, or the guy was traveling an hour down the road to go to train. He'd not long got his blue belt. So we just started rolling on the mats at this soft play centre. Yeah. And that was it. And that was sort of how my journey started and progressed from there.
Perfect. Your disability was from birth, yeah? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's just something that you've kind of like learned to live with as you've grown up and deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you constantly get asked questions like, oh, well, what's it like to do this? Or what's it like doing jiu-jitsu with one arm? Right? If I'm honest, I've never done it with two.
Yeah. So you can't compare contrast.
No, I can't. It's difficult because although I can visually watch people, and automatically if I'm watching as a fan, I just watch and enjoy.
Yeah.
If I'm watching with an intent to learn something for myself, I'm constantly processing whatever's happening and whether or not it's even remotely applicable to me.
Yeah.
But my ability to do that very quickly translates well to coaching.
Yeah.
So if I sort of elaborate a little bit, what I'm getting at is I'll look at, it's quite strange. Although I was born without my right hand, in my brain and the way I'm wired, I would naturally be right-handed.
Okay.
So the only reason I know this is I once told a doctor that when I dream, I've got both my hands.
Right.
And in my dreams, I'm always right-handed.
Yeah.
Now, how that works, I haven't got a clue.
How the
Still
brain
don't know
works.
now.
Right? Yeah.
But naturally, I go to do things with my right hand, despite the fact that it's never been there.
Right.
So
okay.
what I managed to do is I learn something right-handed, then have to swap it over left-handed and see if it even works for me. So already I understand a position both sides,
Yeah.
and then I've got to adapt it to something I can do.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when it comes to then passing it on coaching, it's dead simple because I've already worked it out both sides and established how I have to adapt to that technique to be able to do it myself.
Yeah.
So if anybody comes in, oh, well, I can't move my hips that way. Usually I tell them to move the hips, to be honest. But if there's a legitimate reason why they can't do something, it's actually very quick and easy for me to be able to swap it over and do it on the other side.
Yeah, for sure.
Or
like you said, that
make
must
a little
make
adjustment.
you a better coach. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. The biggest critic, I suppose, is what my students do when they compete.
Yeah. Well, it's a good test, isn't it? It's a good litmus test. If you're producing quality students, it's like, well, that means you're a quality teacher. Normally.
Yeah, I say I'll go on about my little brother, but he got his purple belt just before the lockdown started, and essentially moved in with me throughout the whole of COVID, so that we could carry on training together. Yeah. Just to, tick boxes.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's a phenomenal sort of athletic specimen. He's very, very gifted, just because he's exercised all the way through his teenage years.
Yeah.
But technically, he's very, very good.
Right.
He doesn't even know what he does to be very good, but he is.
He's got the brain.
Yeah, so I'm more than happy sending him out competing because he is a better example of my jiu-jitsu than I am myself.
Yeah. And was jiu-jitsu just something you naturally kind of went to then? Did you enjoy it from the get-go? Or was there kind of a struggle of like, oh, I'm not really sure if this is for me. Maybe I'll go back to swimming. Or was it just like, yeah, jiu-jitsu, this is it?
So I had shoulder surgery twice in my right side, and essentially it was from a repetitive strain injury. So I was at a high level with that. I'd got a couple of world and British records in my late teens, had the shoulder surgeries, and going back to it, the last time I saw the surgeon, he just went, if you go back to it, we're going to have to do it again. And the more we do it, the more the movement in your shoulder is going to be restricted. So essentially, if he has to operate again, my shoulder is going to be locked.
Right.
And my range of movement will become very, very limited. So I had maybe 4 months where I just thought, well, I can't do anything. That was everything I've always done. I used to train sort of 30 hours a week when I was swimming. And so it was just mental. It was everything that took over my life. And it just, like I said, I'd always been a UFC fan with emphasis on the groundwork. So when I stumbled upon it, that was it for me. I thought, I can do this. And what I can't do, I can adapt and I can change.
It's interesting because you said that you liked the groundwork in the early UFCs, but for most people, that was the boring part because jiu-jitsu wasn't like the thing then, was it? It was like the crowd. You could see the crowd getting restless because they were just laying on top of each other. Obviously, now we know it's like the chess game and they're working for position and then working for the submission after. But to start off with, it was like, nah, people wanted the stand up. They wanted the blood. They wanted the stand and bang.
I've always enjoyed the puzzle of anything. So when I was sort of a young teenager, I wanted to be a surgeon.
Right.
And then I got to about 13, 14, and my dad went, you need 2 arms to be a surgeon, right? And I went, bollocks. I better think of something else to do. And that was what I wanted to do. I enjoyed the puzzle of the human anatomy. Sod's law now, everything can be done laparoscopically, and I probably could have gone into it, but at the time it wasn't a feasible option. And I just carried on swimming and then found jiu-jitsu. I think I just fell into it, and the fact that it was, I could see, even in my very naive sort of teenage mind, that the groundwork was a real puzzle.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much of a puzzle it actually was, but I knew it was a puzzle, and it was that fascinated me, that some people could just move a body part and turn somebody over and then be on top and rip their heads off. It just, I can't quite sort of explain how much that fascinated me. I used to watch the same fights over and over again.
Just analysing them, and
I was just in awe, if I'm honest. You know, I've probably watched the first 4 UFCs more times than I'd care to admit. But it was just the fact that you could be on the floor, be underneath, and still be winning.
Yeah.
And it just fascinated me. So as soon as I started training, that was pretty much it for me. That was it. I was involved, and that was what I was going to do.
Yeah. And how did you find adapting it to start off with then? So as like a complete newbie, because people that are fully, you know, don't have a disability, they struggle with BJJ, and you know, the first, you know, 6 months, a year, etc. That's difficult enough, where you're just being pinned and it's just learning to survive. But then add a disability and it's like, wow, okay, like fair play.
I think it increased my fascination with it because I liked the puzzle.
Yeah.
So being stuck underneath and going, right, I'm stuck here, and you ask somebody else, you know, I'd ask Alex and Ricardo with the blue belts that trained with me at the time, like, how'd you get out of this? And they'd show me something that I'd need 2 arms for.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's not going to work, so I need to come up with something else. So I would always follow a foundation of knowledge, i.e. what they've shown me as an escape or a sweep or whatever, but I would then have to change it for myself. But it increased that problem solving aspect. And although I've always been very physically competitive, it's always been the technique and the problem solving that fascinates me.
Yeah.
So yes, it was more difficult. I imagine I've never done it with 2 arms. But it was that engrossed me into it.
Yeah, for sure. What about competing then? So when did you first start competing? Was it fairly early on, or was it, you know, later?
I did a competition. I was down in Dartford for work at the time, and I think I'd been training 3 months. And I rang up the organizer and went, "Hey, can I jump on this? I'm down here. I've got nothing else to do for the weekend. Can I jump on this competition?"
Yeah.
And they took me in, and I got triangle by the first guy I fought. And I don't even know what happened in the second fight.
Lost.
Yeah, he lost. Yeah. I lost both of them. I'd been training twice a week for 3 months.
Yeah.
Slightly intermittently, like I said, because I'd go away for work as well.
Yeah.
So it was just, I'm enjoying this. Let me go and try and compete.
Yeah.
So I did. And yeah, I mean, I got my ass handed to me, but it made me sort of go back home afterwards and go, right, I got caught with a triangle. Let me go and work on that. Yeah. And then I didn't compete again until after I got my blue belt. And then, if I'm honest, my competitions are very hit and miss. If I've lost, it's either been with a collar strangle, usually.
Yep.
Or via points.
Okay.
But I'm pretty 50-50, to be fair.
Yeah. Do you compete in no gi and gi?
Yeah.
Is there one you prefer?
I prefer the gi.
Okay.
Again, for the problem solving, the grips fascinate me.
Yeah.
So I prefer training in the gi. I tend to compete better in no gi.
Right. Okay. That's interesting then. So the one that you're more interested in, less success in.
Yeah. I mean, it does come down to the grips. Everybody's got twice as much as I do.
Yeah.
So when it actually hits that point, it's I'm at more of a disadvantage wearing the gi. But when it comes to training, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I like to solve the problems more often. I like using the grips. I think that is the dominant part of jiu-jitsu. If you lose the grip fight, you're always going to lose.
Yeah.
But chances are I'm going to lose the grip fight.
Yeah.
So I have to then work my way around that again. So yeah, I prefer the gi, but when it comes to doing no gi, the grips themselves, in the sense of grabbing and holding onto something, is less. There's less of a gap there between me and an able-bodied person. So I tend to manage to compete better in no gi.
Yeah. Perfect. What about the black belt then? So how was it receiving a black belt, and what was that like? Because I've said this before, but BJJ is one of the arts that's kind of kept its respect for the black belt. So you don't get a black belt that's just churned out McDojo style, where you can just pay your money every month and then eventually you'll get a black belt. It's really earned, and you know, not many people get it. So what was that experience like?
It was strange, if I'm honest, because I'd never paid any attention to my belt rank all the way through.
Yeah.
I'd get awarded my belt, I'd go, "Oh, that looks cracking," and that'd be it. So I'd never really paid any attention to it. When it came to getting my black belt, I was surprised, but I also wasn't surprised.
Right.
I put in the time. I've put in loads of time. I've competed at brown belt and, you know, held my own.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to say I dominated, but I managed to fight good high level people, hold my own, sometimes win, sometimes lose.
Yeah.
But I would never be outclassed.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never feel like I wasn't worthy of the belt rank that I had.
Yeah.
Again, I've gone into some fights and just completely had my ass kicked, but then there's others where I've done the same on the reverse. So I have always felt like I've deserved the rank that I've got. I didn't know I was the first disabled black belt in Europe. It was only after speaking to a guy called, do you know what? I can't even remember his name.
Some guy.
Something Silva from Brazil. Yeah. He's a black belt in Brazil that's an above knee amputee. Okay. He's kind of heading the Federation of Para Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
I think it's whatever. It's got an acronym. I can't remember it.
Yeah.
I'm not good at that sort of stuff. But he's heading that. So I spoke to him. He's got essentially a list of all the disabled competitors and their rank. And he went, "Oh yeah, you're first in Europe."
Cool.
I went, "Oh, sound, that'll do."
Yeah, tick.
Yeah, tick that. You know, that'll go down.
Yeah.
It'll something historical to look back on. But yeah, it was overwhelming, to be honest, because it was the first time I'd actually thought about my rank.
Yeah.
First time I'd ever thought, I've actually made it to a high level in this. I didn't know that was going to happen.
Yeah, it was never the goal when you started.
No, I mean, I always had a goal that I'd hope I'd get to black belt before I was 30.
Okay.
Can't remember how old I was. 27?
Yep. What are you now, 29, 30?
29 now, yeah. So yeah, 27 I think I was. So, you know, that was a goal that I'd sort of said early on and then never really put much thought into it because I knew that thinking about it wasn't going to help me get better.
Yeah, just go and train.
Yeah, just go and train with plenty of different people. And I think that's a huge difference maker as well. So I did run before this bloody virus hit. But I do camps every month where people from all over the country essentially get together and train. We'll train for a weekend. We'll do loads of techniques, loads of sparring. And I get to roll with people from all over the country with absolutely no pressure on it. It's just fun.
Yeah.
I think you had Lee Remedios on.
I did.
A couple of weeks back.
Yeah.
He's been up to our camps, so I've rolled with Lee.
Yeah.
He's good fun actually. I get on with him.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. Yeah, I like
it. So you know, we've rolled with Lee, and then there's been loads of people, and every time I do a camp, I'll endeavour to roll with as many people as I can.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing in the martial arts sometimes, because you see it no matter what martial art you do. Sometimes when you see seminars, or you see, even if it's like friendship seminars where there's different styles, but people tend to just train with the same people because it's a comfortable thing to do. So they'll train with the people from their academy, or they'll train with like friends that they know they've worked with before sometimes. I think it's just such a waste, because you're missing out on such an opportunity to train with like different sizes, different people, different strengths, different abilities. And yeah, it's just crazy to me that still happens.
Yeah, I mean, I make a conscious effort to almost force my students to partner themselves up with other people from other gyms that they've not trained with before when I do these camps. So I'll often, do you know what I think it is? I think it's always an anxiety thing. People, you know, there's 50 people in a room of which you probably know 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So there's an anxiety thing of, even in your group of 5 or 6 people, you're still only a small percentage of that.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, that number of people. Often enough, I'll just walk up to people and go, you know, visitors and stuff. Oh, Dave, go partner yourself with Matt over there.
Yeah.
And I'll sort of almost force it upon people.
Yeah.
But I do that in my normal classes as well. Is I will partner people up so that they're not always in the little
bubbles.
comfort zones with the friends, and it's when I started doing it. It was about 2 months after. Quite a few people came up to me and go, you know, I really like when you do that, because it takes that schoolyard anxiety of being the last one stood there going, oh, nobody wants to be my friend.
Getting picked last football practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was actually why I started doing it, because I kind of saw a couple of people hovering back and not stepping forward to choose a partner. Yeah. And essentially, it's not because they don't want to be trained with. It's just their own self-confidence means they shy back, and other people just kind of nod at each other and go, oh, all right, we'll go. So when I saw that happening more often, I went, right, well, I'll step in and I'll partner people up. And sometimes I do it where the size matches with each other. Other times I go the complete opposite and put, you know, my wife, who's 5'3", 5'4", I'll put her with somebody that's 6 foot tall.
Yeah.
Go off you go and make that work on somebody twice your size. Yeah,
it's important.
So, but you know, it seems to work. It's gone down quite well with my club. Yeah. I'll carry on doing it.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly.
When did you start coaching then? What was that like?
I started at blue belts. So the 2 blue belts that set us up, they eventually moved. One of them moved back to Brazil, and one moved down to Brighton. And at that point, I was just kind of sat there going, well, I don't really want to stop training. We're going to keep on training as we are. And I was still a white belt at this point. So there was 6 or 7 of us. And we went, look, we'll just get together and we'll train what we know.
Yeah.
Stick with the fundamentals that we've been taught, and we'll just go over it again. And my retention, my memory retention for the techniques was better than most of the other people, probably because of the amount I had to work it out for myself.
Yeah, and think.
So I'd had to play it through my head a lot more. So I retained a lot more of these techniques. So I kind of almost took on the lead role with these guys, despite the fact that we were all the same level. Yeah. I just retained the techniques better, so to then pass it back again, and we'd just pass it back and forth, and I'd be corrected by Adam, who's my main training partner now, even before this virus anyway. And we'd pass it back and forth, and he'd potentially go, I don't think this were right, I think we did this instead. Yeah. So I go, all right, okay, we'll do that. And then when I got my blue belt, I said to Paul Hartley, who was my sort of head instructor at the time in Preston, so look, can I open the doors a little bit? I said, I don't plan on advertising massively. Yeah. I just want to open the doors and sort of see if we get any more white belts come in and people wanted to start. You know, yeah, that's fine. But this was back in 2012, 13 maybe.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of gyms around.
Yeah, it's still quite early days for it.
Blue belts coaching wasn't wasn't really a big thing back then.
Yeah.
Because again, there wasn't many around. You just did what you did.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was from then. So about 2012, 2013 was when I started coaching, and then I've just carried on from then.
Yeah. And have you got a premises now, or?
Yeah, so we carried on training in the soft play centre.
Yeah.
Up until 6 years ago, and then we opened a gym. And the upstairs of the gym is my club. And it's a good space. It's 120 square meters of mat, good changing rooms, male and female, loads of space to chuck your bags and stuff, which is, plus side of why we can run the camps is because of the venue that we've got.
Yeah, amazing. How's it been this year then? Obviously the past year, how have you stayed motivated to train? And obviously it's good having your brother there, but nothing.
I've had my brother to train with. In between the sort of lockdowns where they've been really strict, I'd managed to sort of read the legislation and twist the rules a little bit and just say to some of the guys,
as most have, to be fair,
yeah,
had to survive, haven't it? Yeah.
To be fair, all I did was say to the guys that were coming in, look, you're bubbled up with this person, that's your training partner, off you go.
Yeah.
Whether they stuck to that, I ain't got a clue. I didn't pay any attention, but that's what I told them initially.
Yeah.
If they want to stick to, they're all adults at the end of the day. They're going to stick to the rules. They'll stick to the rules. If they're not, they're not. So we carried on little sort of intermittent things, but yeah, me and Will just kept training. I'd roll with my wife a little bit. I started lifting more weights again. I'd stopped doing that for years.
Yeah.
So I went back to lifting weights again, put on a bit of weight, and yeah, just sort of kept ticking over really.
Yeah. And how do you see it going in the future then for yourself and your academy, and also kind of BJJ, and then I suppose disabled Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu too?
Starting up, I will always compete just because I enjoy it more than anything.
Yeah.
I enjoy the tournaments. I enjoy the sub-only shows. But my main goal at the minute is as a coach. So I want my students to be able to go out and compete more. So I'll go and support them.
Yeah.
So I think that's my main push at the minute is to work on my students and helping them develop. And like I said, as an academy, as a business, running the camps is fantastic. I love doing that because you get to train with 50 other people in a weekend.
Yeah, sure.
God knows how many of them you've not seen before. So why would I not do that?
Yeah.
Everybody enjoys them. They sell out every time. We get good levels of people there. There's always, whenever we do a camp, there's always at least 10 black belts on the mat as well.
Cool. Yeah.
So there's loads of
experience and knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll constantly push them. As for disabled jiu-jitsu, I've just made contact with a couple of charities that work with amputees. I can't remember the names of them now. But I've said to my wife, I'll spend some time towards the end of this year going to a couple of locations, some in the north, some in the south, and just offering intro sessions to amputees via this charity. So hopefully that'll pan out.
Yeah.
A lot of it depends on sort of what they're able to push out there, because that's the only thing that holds jiu-jitsu back when it comes to having disabled competitors is, one, most of them are amputees. So most of the people that these charities deal with are amputees that have had an amputation via something traumatic, whether that be an infection or diabetes or bike crash, car crash, things like that. I don't know. Each person is different in themselves. So, but because it's usually when it's something traumatic, it affects the self-esteem and whether or not they will then go, oh yeah, I'll go and walk into a room full of people that are all scrapping.
Yeah.
So, if I can put these together, get to a point and go, right, there you go. This is just for you lot. I brought a couple of the other disabled sort of jiu-jitsu practitioners along with me. We'll teach you some stuff. We'll get you started, and then we will point you in the direction of a gym in your local area. I'll see how it pans out again. The minute I daren't say I'd commit to anything.
No.
But that's just with the way the world is at the minute. So, but yeah, that is a plan for the near future, and hopefully doing that means that 5 years down the line there'll be a decent number of disabled athletes doing jiu-jitsu and then being able to showcase it.
I think it's a great idea because, as you said, building that self-esteem. I don't think there's lots of ways to do it, but I think martial arts are a great way to build people's self-esteem.
Yeah, I think back up. I don't think there's a better way, to be honest.
Yeah, and the fact that from day one you're kind of with people and you're being tactile with them through gripping and rolling and things like that. It's a great way to form relationships really fast.
Yeah.
And that's what we all need, I think, now after a year of being locked away on our own.
Yeah, year of being locked in a room.
Yeah.
I've not had a ridiculous amount of contact with people.
Yeah.
Even sort of Zoom, phone calls, stuff like that. I'm pretty introverted myself anyway. So outside of the jiu-jitsu stuff that I do, I don't really do anything else.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm fairly boring. So when I'm teaching and I'm involved in doing my job, that's my social life. That's what I enjoy doing. And it's made a huge difference to me personally. So I don't see why it couldn't do the same for other people.
Yeah, for certain. Awesome. Where can people get in touch with you then? So if they want to find out more about you or to find out more about your school if they're in the area?
There's the Lakes BJJ is the Instagram tag handle thing, whatever it is. That's the gym. My Instagram's Phantom of the Mats.
Great name, by the way. You win the best name for Instagram handle on that one.
Best name for Instagram. I'll take that.
Phantom of the Mats.
I'll take that. It took me a while to think that one up. Facebook's just the Lake District BJJ Academy.
Yeah.
I think that's it, really. Like I said, I'm pretty boring. Just got them.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate you chatting to us. And always inspiring, and good luck with the competitions and stuff and the seminars that you're going to be running when the world gets back to normal, hopefully in the not too distant.
Yeah, hopefully we've got some new plans for a couple of decent guests up this year, so we'll see how they go. And most of the camps we do are with Ben Poppleton, and if you haven't heard of him, try and get him on your podcast because he's good fun.
Okay, cool. Yeah, awesome.
Loads of stories. He'll tell you the whole history of this art.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll get him on. Yeah, brilliant. All right, then. Cheers, Sam. Cheers, mate.
No, pleasure.